and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Can I get a motion to approve the February 6th minutes?
Motion to approve the February 26 minutes.
6th minutes.
6 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. No chairperson comments. Community comments. Any community comments? Once, going twice. Well, then we'll move on to student comments. And first up is the Misco Hill Middle School students.
So can you take pictures over here?
All right, think we're ready to start. So I feel like I should say, prepare for amusement. Are we ready to rumble? Some amusement, some education, inspiration, and innovation, because this is an incredible group of students who volunteered to share with you tonight about some of the work they've been doing in their technology class, utilizing the program Project Lead the Way. So with us tonight is Mrs. Kaler, their teacher, and Dr. Quinn, who without his support and vision, probably this programming wouldn't exist at Misco, so we're very fortunate to have both of them here with us to support the work. And these students were chosen to present tonight because they are all award winners in terms of their project designs. They're going to tell you a little bit more about that as we progress. So I thought initially I would turn it over to, you can keep going, Sam, Mrs. Kaler and Dr. Quinn to tell you a little bit about Project Lead the Way and what brought us to this point.
Hi, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mrs. Kaler and I teach technology as well as automation and robotics. And this is it's the first, I think, like really year teaching it, but we had it last year. We kind of piloted it a little bit. I was a biology teacher and then I kind of jumped into robotics, and what's really cool is that I learn every day from these students, so we're immersed in it together. And just thinking bigger picture, when we look at Portrait of a Learner, it's really cool to see these kids meeting all those competencies every day. Skillful collaborator, inspired innovator, solution seeker. I see it every day in the classroom, so it's really, really cool. We troubleshoot together. It's a struggle sometimes, but it's a fun struggle, I think, in the end. But this group was really amazing first semester, so I'm really proud of that.
Not much to add. I want to get right to the start of the show, but I really do want to recognize the efforts of Mrs. Kaler to make this program possible. We were in a pinch a couple years ago, not having a technology candidate. Pool was not where we needed to be, and we needed somebody who could buy into the long-term vision of Project Lead the Way, which we're now pleased to say runs from elementary through the high school and continues to expand with almost each passing day. But Mrs. Kaler jumped into the fray, stepped out of her comfort zone, and is making incredible experiences for kids. And just to see the leaps and bounds with each iteration of the project is super inspiring. We had the Mass STEM Hub come in and visit, and they were noticing just how much the designs had improved from the last iteration. We're also pleased to share that the Mass STEM Hub has accepted all of their projects for the Industry Connects program. So there's an industry professional in the state of Massachusetts who's going to review and give them feedback on their designs. And we'll also have that opportunity in the spring as well. And then we're just trying to work with a group that's called Dynamic Attractions that does, if you've ever been on Soarin' on Disney World, they designed that. We're working with them to get some feedback from an actual attraction designer. We're not sure there's anybody in Massachusetts who does that kind of work, so we're trying to make sure that they hear from industry experts because in case this is something they want to do for a career. So without further ado, Sam.
Yep, so without further ado, we are joined today by you, Trevin, Marin, Lily, Naya, and Ashley. So thank you all for being here. And this is the additional award winners who weren't able to join us this evening. Yep, Naya's gonna kick us off. Go ahead, Naya.
So in this project, we were asked to recreate an amusement park ride and transform our imaginary creative ideas into real life. And also in this project, we had to program and code like our rides so that we know how they move. And also we had to engineer and sketch our ideas so that we know how they look like. And finally, we also had to plan ahead of time so that we will get the best results.
There were 3 categories that we were graded on: the prototype, the portfolio, and the programming. And there were the prototype was we had to draw out what we thought we were gonna make and our idea. The portfolio was we had papers that we would draw what we how we were gonna make it, what we needed and stuff. And the programming was we had to use a website to program engines and motors to move the project around.
The design brief was where we had to put all of our ideas together and the materials that we needed to use to make our build. And after we made our design brief, we would put it in our portfolio, and then Mrs. Kaler would look at them and see if we needed to change anything.
Those students in the video were explaining an iteration of their design. They had to include little characters in their planning, and one of the things I had asked each group if they learned anything, if they had any fails, if they learned anything, and they all said, oh yeah. And this group learned that they had to adjust the height of their project because their little people kept hitting their heads. So we talked about the importance of creating prototypes so that we work out all those design flaws in advance.
That's in real life.
Right?
These may not actually be OSHA compliant, but these are prototypes of ideas.
All right. Is this you, Mary?
We drew out our annotated sketch to decide what mechanisms we wanted to use and also how we wanted to design our project to see which materials we wanted to use and what we wanted to. Our Vex code is basically where we coded to make our ride, like what we wanted our ride to do and move.
If you keep playing for a moment there, Sam.
Sure.
Mrs. Kaler and the student were troubleshooting during their showcase. So you can see that he references the code a little bit. He has it behind him on the computer. Mrs. Kaler's asking guiding questions and offering feedback, and he's coming up with solutions through her coaching. What impressed me most in this portion was their design wasn't working in that moment. And rather than step back and give up or expect the adult to solve the problem, the group just kept at it until they had figured out what they needed to do. And I felt like that was just a natural part of their process. It wasn't just because people were watching them in that classroom that day.
The electrical thing that we use, it shows a model, and it's telling about like where we had to like put the wires to connect the computer and the brain and the ride together to make the movement of the mechanism work.
So this is the project that won the category for best overall. So we're gonna hear from these project designers, and then we'll show you a quick clip of their project in action. First.
In our group, we Our most challenge that we faced was keeping the tree stable because every time we would put the tree, it would keep falling apart and it would keep hitting the little people carts, which would stop the ride. So we had to figure out a way how to keep everything stable so it wouldn't keep stopping the ride. And then we had to redo our program multiple times until it worked out and we figured it out. And then we solved our problems by working together and we tried multiple times solve our problems, and at the end we finally did it.
So when we started to do our ride, we thought of a ride called Hurricane, but it didn't work as well because it had to do some motions that we couldn't do. So we decided to make another ride called the Thunderbolt, but we called it the Snowy Blizzard. And that we got it from like Christmas themes since we were like near Christmas. So we got Thunderbolt and Christmas themed things together, and we got the idea to make the Snowy Blizzard.
And then Ashley and I were in my group, and Ashley was the electric engineer, so she was the one who was coding the whole time and making our ride move. And Naya was the project manager, so she was the one telling us the steps and what we had to do. And then if we like messed up something or we skipped a part, then she would tell us that we had to fix this. And I was the annotated sketcher, so I would take Ashley and Naya's ideas and then after I took Ashley and Naya's ideas, I would draw them out on a piece of paper so we wouldn't forget.
It's too bad. That has the most perfect music. Audio.
The jazz in the background is okay.
The Coke machine has a lot.
It's like nice, like very wintry, like it should be in the slide deck. We'll make sure you get a copy of the video. But what's also really impressive about this piece is the digital media combining of like the right choice of music, the annotation of what's going on in the video, reflecting on their learning. And then I was really super impressed with how they used their strengths, what they knew about themselves, to split up the group to optimize the dynamics and figure out how to work together while leveraging what they did best. So we'll definitely make sure you get a copy of the video because it's one of my favorite pieces of media that we've created this year.
And I remember this group, correct me if I'm wrong, but we really struggled for a while. And then we were down to maybe a couple days, right, remaining because we had the countdown on the board. And then within 2 class periods, they had put this together and really worked together to finalize the project, which is amazing because it came out awesome.
The other last piece is that Mrs. Kaler puts on a showcase that's open to everybody in the school. So there's a little bit of risk involved right here. So if, when you're putting out a project, did you feel like a little bit of like, how did that make you feel to knowing that it was going to be public, that people were going to see it? Did it make it feel a little bit more, put a little more effort into it? Because like you just...
Were you stressed or was it just me?
We talked about that a little bit when we were practicing for this evening, because we talked about were there times where you felt like you wanted to quit, and you guys said yes, right? And we talked about that it's one of the benefits of doing something like this in a school setting is quitting wasn't really an option, so we really had to utilize all those skills and keep going. And I think one group said their biggest challenge with it was that they argued a lot, and we thought about all the skills that are inherent in learning how to work through that kind of team dynamic. So Lots of learning that happened here, both in terms of Portrait of a Learner and our frameworks.
In a box, it's a programming environment, I assume?
Yes.
Does it have automatic capability to a certain set of motors and things?
Yes, yeah, so
All
it's
of that is supplied by Project Lead the Way?
yes, and it's also external too. So if students want to continue using VEX in college, like WPI has a whole VEX team.
Yep.
So it's a nice onboarding to combine both the programming piece and the physical mechanics of that.
Cool. So what types of, can we expand the number of motors that we use and different facilities that we use as we go on through the Project Lead the Way? Are the kids restricted to the set of motors that are available? And I'm trying to get an idea of the constraints of Project Lead the Way and how it can be expanded.
I've got a thought, but so anything that VEX makes is within the wheelhouse. So obviously there's a curriculum where there are specific mechanisms, because you do an entire unit on the different types of mechanisms.
Yeah,
that
which
create.
leads into this project, yeah.
Cool.
Does the coding environment move, like, does it support a traditional text-based coding infrastructure as well, or is it all block-based?
So they moved to block-based when they upgraded to the new V5 program. So it's all block-based now.
But when they move on to 7th grade, there's computer science for innovators and makers, which again is block-based, but for those students who have a background in Python, they can program the microbit in several different languages. We're also exploring, because we have the CS program at the high school, looking at adding a special 8th grade elective to kind of continue on with the programming piece. Now in 3rd and 4th grade, students are playing with MIT Scratch as a build-up and onboarding into this program.
Awesome, nice job.
Thank you. Any questions for our students?
Oh, God. So what types of, did you have a list of constraints that you had for the type of project you wanted to create? Can you describe that a little bit?
One of our constraints is we could only use 3 motors, so we had to decide which what we wanted to use the motors for, and if they were like, we had to make a bunch of decisions based on what we could.
Yeah, because Marin's project was pretty cool. You guys, can you explain what you guys did?
Oh, we did basically a haunted house, and we used one motor to make our ride go down kind of like a river, and then at the end we used another motor to make a figure pop out at the end, and we had to figure out how to code it to time it correctly.
Tell them what the figure was.
Yeah.
It was a hit.
So it would pop out of the sewer drain at the end of the ride.
That's really cool.
That's fun.
And then you also had an aesthetic element. You had to make it look visually appealing and like a ride somebody would want to go on.
Yeah.
Right? Anything else that you had to think about while you were designing?
We also had to make sure that our friendly humans wouldn't fall off. And also it was hard while we were building the rides because there's only like seconds to finish the ride, and also since many groups were building the rides, the materials were running out, so we had to get all the materials fast, like so that they don't run out.
A little bit of Survivor.
Sideline.
There you go.
Very real life experiment there.
Very cool.
Well, thank you for having us. We always enjoy our time to share.
On to the next agenda item. Student comments.
The first thing that I have is about the Mendon-Upton boys basketball season. It is still going very strong. They're still advancing in the playoffs. We'll be playing goal tonight to advance. And then Mendon-Upton will be attending the State Career Development Conference, which is from March 9th through the 11th at Convention in Boston. Students have been working since September on their projects, and we're very excited to make this trip to compete for a spot at internationals, which is being held in Orlando, Florida this year. And then the 2 events that I have is that the Nipmuc Drama Guild is presenting Beauty and the Beast, and it's going to be on Friday, March 25th and Sunday, March 26th. So they hope to see you guys there. And then there's Nipmuc Art Club has been sponsoring a week without art week this week, and all the framed artworks in our school have been taken down, and all the paintings and murals have been covered with white paper, just for us to appreciate art and the talent that's been represented.
Very nice. Thank you. So what time is the boys' basketball game?
I think it's going on right now.
Right.
Yeah. So if I get a text, I'll let you know.
There we go.
Breaking news.
Yes.
Yeah.
Breaking news. All right, well, with that, turn it over to Dr. Cohen.
Mr. Maloney here, thank you, John.
Yeah.
If you want to come on up, we can sit here if you want, or if you want to present today.
How you doing today?
Good.
Thank you for having me. I am the Model UN advisor for the Nipmuc High School, and so I'm asking for permission for our Model UN group to go visit Woodstock Academy's Model UN conference. It's their eighth conference. We went last year. It's located in Woodstock, Connecticut, which is, why I'm coming here. And we had some luck last year. We had 2 students receive outstanding delegates, and one of our former students is now at Seton Hall Model UN. He loved it, and so we're just hoping we can go back again this year. 2 reasons. One, it's a nice location, but they also do a great job at helping out new delegates kind of break into the Model UN atmosphere, the Model UN conference. And 2, they don't have a delegate fee. They don't have a group fee. There is a $15 individual fee, and it's about 40 minutes away. I don't have the number of students yet because, due to asking for permission first and then being able to work that out later. But it is a good time, and it helps build up communication skills, helps build up problem solving skills, and global citizen is what it is. It's a great thing, So I hope we get the opportunity to go back again this year.
What's the date?
What's that?
What's the date again?
It is April 29th. It's a Saturday, and it's a one-day event, so it's not overnight. We would like to do a college conference later for next year. That might be an overnight, but we just got to fundraise first and foremost. Those are a lot more expensive. And second, find the right conference that fits our needs. Like Tulane had asked if we wanted to go, but before COVID. I think that might be too much of a
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess I just need a motion.
I move that we approve the field trip for the Model UN to go to Woodstock, Connecticut.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Appreciate your help.
Thanks.
I get really excited when Maloney talks about Model UN, because I'm a former Model UN. And we did go to the EU conference and UConn conference, and so it's a great experience for students. So I always get his ear to find out what they're learning, what they're doing. It's definitely a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I will add, I forgot to mention, we are doing a little bit more than conferences. We have had Jason McInerney from the Foreign Service Office do a Zoom conference with our Model UN group in the fall, and we are trying to work out a meet and greet with the Brazilian consulate. New Brazilian ambassador is trying to come up to Boston and meet us, but there's been things kind of trying to iron out the wrinkles. So,
Are there any popular issues on the table for Model UN nowadays? Are they pretty much going around the same general thing?
No, I think, the Ukraine-Russian crisis has been popping up. In fact, that's one of the things that will be showing up for this conference.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Doctor, to interrupt, but I just wanted to add that.
I'm
in
glad.
a bit more.
I always have lots of questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
I missed some of those days. It was really, really fun. All right, but I enjoy these days too, and I'll be able to give some highlights. And, I shared it with you. Pull that up. I put some visuals this time along
Cool.
with. And I could have probably done about 20 slides on the Inspired Learning Day. I didn't. I tried to sneak them into 3. So if you go to the next one, I really.
Is the visual arts in the budget?
Exactly. I could go on and on about this, but I'll give just some brief highlights about our Inspired Learning Day. I did share a lot of the links of the prep materials and the pre-introductory activities, and there are even more reflections that came after that were shared out with staff, etc. And I want to start by thanking Dr. Dave Quinn, who was spearheading the organization of our Inspired Learning Planning Committee, which was made up of representatives from all of the buildings. So it's the first time for Inspired Learning Days or any of these events that we actually brought together a full district team to do the work. So you'll see, and what I wanted to point out just with a couple, I have a lot of visuals on the next slide, but I wanted to show basically the through line that we have at all the different levels so you get a sense of what the day was like. But this was one of the scenarios. The ground is lava. You're trapped on a building with lava surrounding you on all sides. You have to find a way to transport yourself by zip line to the other building where safety awaits. So be mindful of the drop zone. So we had drop zones at the high school was one of the elements that you had to land. Couldn't be too soon or too late for the landing or you fall into the lava. So this was basically the scenario. And if you go to the next slide, this is where I have lots of visuals. So on the left, in the pre-planning, we have the column on the left is high school. So the skills of the global citizen, and basically I showed an alignment of the global citizenship piece. Our main goal for this day was to expose our students across the district to the different portrait of a learner competencies and to really bring it to life and have them be familiar. So the purpose wasn't actually the zip line. The purpose was to expose them and understand and relate to and be exposed to the portrait of a learner. The zip line was the creative experience that we thought that the team came together and decided that the whole district, they could do it in different ways at each of the levels. And so you have on the upper left, the skills of a global citizen. That's what you see related to our competencies, our CAN statements at the high school and mastery learning transcript that you've heard about. You see the image below. When I walked into classrooms, I was so proud of the work that the whole district did. I started here at the high school. I hit just about every classroom here, then almost every classroom at the middle school, then Clough. I ran out of time at Memorial, so I didn't get to the 3rd floor. So I got to the first 2 floors, but almost saw this in action across the board. So I saw students at the high school using math and it was more in depth and the work they were doing, and that was competitive. So that's on the left there. In the middle, we had a lot of pre-activities. So this was, what was it called? Like a freeze frame where they had to do the images.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. I'm forgetting the name.
Pictionary.
Yeah, so basically they had to pick a competency, get to know it, and it was a pre-activity to be exposed to competency. So this was a global citizen, and these are middle school students that created that image. So I had 50 images to draw from, just kind of giving you one example. From the presentation, right below where you have the red arrow, that was part of the modeling and design in the presentation for the middle school students. There's a little bit more scaffolding, so it was broken up into different sections, but essentially they were doing, in the end, close to what the high school was doing. It was just, it had more scaffolds in there. The elementary
what they did, so they had books that they read to the students, and each book was aligned to a competency. So this is the one related to global citizenship. We brought in Gigi from SD Math, which you've heard a lot about, and it was about, you know, helping Gigi be transported across zip lines safely. There wasn't lava, I don't think, you know, it was a little bit safer. And so on the bottom, some of the images that we have there too. On the left, we created, there were tokens that you could earn in the pre-activities to use Inspired Innovator or Solution Seeker, Global Citizens, any of them, and that would help you in elements of your design on the next day when you were doing it. We also had stickers, so students would identify with what competency they related to the most. And then, so I walked into elementary classrooms and I had second graders saying, because we have superhero outfits from Halloween. So I was the global citizen or something, you know, so I had the image on my shirt. They're like, oh, I have that sticker. We're the same, you know, they're talking like, I'm an inspired innovator. And so they had the stickers and they were excited about that. And we really transformed them into, so they were more relatable, especially for the younger students, into superhero powers, right? And so there's a lot more to it. I loved at the elementary level, when I walked into the kindergarten classroom, I saw students, I told them, I've been in every classroom and I think you're the best group for collaboration that I have seen. So they were like, you know, working on it. Others were just diving in and working on the project because they weren't too worried about what it was going to be. They're just diving in. I saw students jumping up and down and screaming, this is awesome. The competitions that we had here with the grade levels were really fun. So I was able to, you know, be one of the judges. So it was a really great experience. Now there's a lot, it, you know, wasn't perfect. There's a lot we can learn, and we have lots of reflections and feedback for it. But for the purpose of the day or portion of the day, they really hit it out of the park. If you go to the next slide. So what I have here at the upper left, we have one of the thousands of pictures that we have from the day at Nipmuc, and that was in the gym when they had 3 tries to hit the drop zone. It was really great to see students quickly adjusting and trying to fix it to make it work. You have in the upper right-hand corner, one of the juniors, the group that ended up winning, talked about the inner engineer. I really like that part of it. In the bottom left, and I'm not going to read all of it, I think you can probably see it, but the bottom left 3 quotes are from elementary students. And so we captured reflections from all of the students in the district in different ways. Some were quotes, some were videos, etc. We also used Thrively for our reflections, which was a great use of that tool. I don't know if the sound will work, but if you try and go to either to the time of like 2:15 or 3:15, you have some videos. If you could, yes, scroll to 2:15. Yeah, this is the kindergarten. We all count down together. Gigi's there. Another class. And there are a couple of good videos at 3:15, which they all scream. Yeah, that was just it. Yeah. Yeah, right after that goes into another one. And so you'd go in and they'd say, oh, we built this for safety. So you had some like contraptions at the elementary where, you know, Gigi's really safe. Yeah, which reminded me when I was on the gondola for the first time at the mountain this past week, and I've never been on one. I was like, I am like Gigi in this gondola, really protected. But so that made me feel better. But so it really was an incredible day. And I just wanted to be able to highlight that and really, truly thank those that put in, I mean, to the detail of the coloring books that we created. So this was all created by our educators and our leaders. It was incredible. So we will have I know some of the feedback, because it was a design challenge, it was different from an Inspired Learning Day where you have different choices, which is a lot of what we do in Inspired Learning Days. But this is a lead-in now for Inspired Learning Day we'll have later on, and we'll have choices. We also had, I could keep going on and on, I'll try not to, but we had high school students who went down and were helping out in the elementary, so we timed it. So we had helpers, and I think one of the best was that I saw it at the high school, we had these expert engineers. And so I was in one room and they were really struggling. Then suddenly, what was the name of the engineer here? Do you remember?
Give me 2 seconds.
All right. So I just want to recognize him, but he came in and they said, "Oh, thank goodness, the engineer is here." And they said,
Andrew
"We have what was it?"
Andrew Downing.
Andrew Downing. And so, we have an engineer here, and they got feedback from, different expert engineers on their design, and then they would tweak it. So that we were really thankful that we had some people come in and help us. And we partner with Treetop Adventures as well. And I'm sure I'm missing some details, but.
Yeah, so Treetop Adventures, the GM and CEO was going to come in. Unfortunately, he was taking care of his nephew and COVID, so couldn't come. But the winning group from the high school all received a voucher, one free voucher to go on Treetop Adventures, the zipline course.
Cool.
And then we've got some discounted codes for our middle school students as well. So we were trying to, bridge the two, so as a win-win for get that expertise of somebody in that zipline field and add a little relevance for students as well.
That's great. Any questions on that before I move on?
So there was, which place, so you had all of the schools in the district at the same time, is that the idea? And
Staggered throughout the
It's
day, but
staggered,
same
yeah.
variation, same challenge.
Very cool.
So go to the next slide. Another highlight is our Professional Development Day. So I want to thank Dr. Cheryl Kirkpatrick, who's also behind, everyone's here today, and the PD committee, and I'm sure in the future she'll speak more about the ongoing PD work that we're doing, but we're really making a lot of progress. I just wanted to give you the array of the types of PD that we're able to offer with these additional days, and you'll start to see that alignment and our focus on tier 1 of multi-tiered systems of support. We have continued co-teaching. We had culturally responsive universally designed assessments and music classroom, safety care, portrait of a learner. I'm not going to name them all, you can see them. But really, the PD committee has been reaching out, getting feedback, and adjusting, to feedback. And one thing we have with the half days, they are in many ways building-based PD, but we're trying to make sure that all of our teachers are getting the standard supports in PD in the district as well. I don't know if you have any questions about it, but the link to the PD webpage is on the slide. I can send it to you, or if I didn't put it in the notes, I can send that to you if you're interested in reading more about the various PD. But just want to thank the PD committee and all of their hard work that goes into that. Strategic planning, my favorite thing to talk about. It is important that we're highlighting what we're doing at each of our meetings here, just to keep everyone in the loop. But we had our last meeting on February 13th, and we did envisioning, the future, back to the future protocol. And basically, what we do is we transport ourselves in the DeLorean to the future, and then we envision what our future in 2028 would look like in our schools if we could have everything that we want for our students. Then we go back to 2023, we talk about what it was like, and then we go in the process of what are the steps that we took. I have a list that's about, I don't know, it's probably 6 pages long of the notes. I just pulled out a couple interesting suggestions that came out. This is just preliminary visioning. What we do is then at the next meeting, we'll be looking at feedback from the focus groups and all of the groups, and surveys as well that we keep sending out. And I'm going to send another one out when I have the newsletter go out to the community again this week. And we'll be analyzing that and our progress that we made so far on our strategic plan, the last 2 strategic plans. And we'll look at data at the meeting after that. And then we'll come back to vision, beliefs, and our steps for the plan. I added in building-based focus groups.
just to try to get as much feedback as I can from each of the buildings. So that starts this Thursday, where I'll be going to each of the schools just to make sure that everyone internally has an opportunity. I had some night sessions, after school sessions, and would love to have more feedback from our staff. So offering those up. I don't know if you have any questions.
Any other ideas on potential surveys or?
What I'm going to do is I have that initial feedback, which is kind of like what we've done in the groups of what you'd want to keep, what you want to change, what do you love, what do you envision, what are you proud of what we've done, curriculum, any of those basic questions. I'm going to send that out again. I just did to the faculty again, and then to the community. And then when we meet at the next meeting, we'll determine if we want to have any targeted surveys on other topics that we might want to go out to people, but that'll come in a couple months. Any other questions? All right, thank you. So then want to bring us to where we're at, the budget development process. So as you know, we're finishing up our budget presentations from the departments tonight, which you'll be hearing from soon. We're in that prioritization process. We have the budget hearing in March. We're almost in March, so we have a lot of budget meetings coming up in the next few weeks. So it's an exciting time. So what we wanted to do, because we received information on the state budget. So if you go to the next slide, and Jay's going to come on up, we wanted to give you a couple highlights, and then we do come back in a week as well. We added that additional meeting, so we'll go more in depth with where we're at in the process right now. And this part to you.
Hi, everybody. How are we doing tonight? All right. So the governor's budget was released last Thursday, and it came out about as expected, with one exception, which we'll get to. Chapter 70, we got the mandatory $30 a student. There was a lot of talk about there being $100 a student, more money per student. Didn't happen. So that's about $60,000 as a net increase. Transportation, I had heard rumors they were going to fund it at 100%. I don't believe they have. I have not done the math. It's based on what we report on our end of the year report that I filed last summer. But we did get a fairly decent increase there. And typically that number does go up a little bit more, but right now that's the increase. The reduction you see there is in charter school tuition reimbursement, and you will see in FY23, that number was $143,958. That is not what we're going to receive this year, even though that's what was on the cherry sheet. When the October 1 enrollment is filed, they then reevaluate that, and we had 3 less students, so they lowered our reimbursement. They also lowered our tuition, so it's pretty much a match, but that's a reduction. This reflects next year at 71,000. They're estimating the same, 17 students now as opposed to 20. That will again be reassessed probably in November or December, but they reimburse you on a sliding scale of 100%, 60%, 40% over a period of time. So eventually the reimbursement isn't quite the same as what the tuition is, which doesn't go down 100%, 60%, 40%. So the net for the state is 134,000 and change, a little less than 1%. So I guess I look at that as a positive, only in that last year, I think that net increase initially was like $400. So I guess 1% is better than 0. So that's where we stand on that part. Minimum contributions came out. Now, as you know, they gave us the calculator to try and figure out how this came out, and it did not come out quite the same when I did that through that exercise as this. That's mostly because some of the information you need to calculate that wasn't released until the governor's budget was released. Bottom line is that Upton is up about a little over 5%, and Mendon's up a little over 3%. You can see the differences there. That does skew the balance remaining that's split by the enrollment. So it really, we need to find out where the towns are as far as what they can handle as a net increase. And then we kind of going to build backwards off of that. It's really going to be driven this year by Upton, what they can fund, because Mendon's going to be less just because they're a lower percentage amount and because their MLC is basically half of what Upton's is. So that's where we are with those 2 particular areas on the budget. As far as the expenditure side right now, transportation, the bus bids, I don't know if we've even talked about this yet. The bus bids came back in. We had one bid from Telstone. He basically matched what he had in his extension for year one. Year 2 and 3 are considerably less than what he had for year 2 of the extension, so that's a benefit. But we're looking at about a 10% increase there. Health insurance, that was estimated, and I've been building it around 10%. I probably will mention this in a second, but today I got an email from our advisors, and Harvard Pilgrim's first volley to us is an 11.8% increase. They know that that's a non-starter, I believe. I've already told them that, but so we still have some work to do with our program on that. Salaries, the COLA, steps and lanes, all of it put together, it's about a $1.2 million increase, a little over 5.5%. So those are the main drivers as far as fixed costs. Variables, this we kind of carried. I'm going to go back, sorry.
So that transportation number, is that just the core transportation?
To and from school and preschool, the combination of those two. It's not special ed. Yeah.
And it's not, and it's not like after school, it's not field trips, it's not any of that?
No. All those are built separately on an as-needed basis. You know, it's pretty standard when, from what I've been hearing through the business managers listserv, this is what people are seeing pretty much across the board. A lot of contracts were done just prior to COVID. They went through COVID, they can't find drivers now, the cost of gas is up, the salaries are up, all their costs are up. I mean, I kind of understand where they're coming from. Doesn't help us, but I do get it on the business side. Worcester retirement, I believe we kind of knew this about a month ago. Our increase is $97,380. It's about a 10% increase as well. Health insurance, I just mentioned to you. Right now, they're at 11.8. We will bring that down quite a bit. I mean, my guess is we're going to end up around 8, though. I think that's eventually where we're going to end up. That seems to be the market rate. I'd like to see it be 4%. But ironically, they don't always just do what I tell them. Don't know why. I don't know how that works. Our district tuition is a variable only in that we still, you know, obviously other kids could get placed out, other kids could return. But because of what we've gotten in circuit breaker this year, it's going to offset that major increase that we're looking at. The 14% for private schools, collaboratives won't be the same, public schools won't be the same. But right now, I mean, you know, special ed and Jen D'Angelo in particular has done a really good job of bringing kids back and trying to mitigate some of these costs. So I think we're going to weather that fairly well compared to some other districts from what I've been hearing. Lane changes, we've got all those now. The only thing left in a variable there is if we have anybody that decides to retire between now and the end of the year, or if we've got a couple of staff members that are on leaves of absence, they don't have to let us know whether they're coming back. I think the date is April 1, is that right? So that's another variable as far as on the expenditure side. Maureen kind of put this together, but this came out, I got this email too, and I don't know if we got it from the same source or different sources, but basically 71% of new Chapter 70 money is going to 32 districts. So the state is, although they're increasing money for education, it is being directed toward low-income communities, which I understand. You don't want these districts to fall behind, but they're not doing much for districts that are not low-income districts or driven by low income. 93% is going to 106 districts, and 212, which is where we fit into, are just getting the, you know, the minimum amount. So it is what it is. There's not a lot we can do.
This has been the story the last 12 years.
Pretty much, right. We're still below target. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. We're not a lot below target. Again, I haven't looked at all the details yet because it just came out, but we were at 75%. My guess is we're going to be around the same next year.
What do you mean?
75% of target share as opposed to 82, which is what they say that is the cap.
Mendon's target share is 2.5.
Yeah, I did. We weren't last year. We were down last year.
They're at 78. I mean,
and that could be part of the reason that their MLC. Well, yeah.
But remember they cap it.
We're close, but we're not quite there. But either way, like you said, Phil, it's been the same.
We're going to be there.
Right. My understanding was the cap was 82.
Well, that's the max is 82.5.
So your target share, your target share is 82.5, but they won't increase it from the 75 or 74 to 82.5. They'll only go up a certain percentage.
1 or 2%, depending on where you are.
So the impact to MLC is two things. It's the cap, but it's also the fact that the student population has shifted.
Right.
So the student population remained the same. The MLC the MLC amount for Mendon would be $125,000 more, and Upton would be $125,000 less. Okay. If you run that calculation.
All right.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Bottom line, we're getting a little bit of money, like 1% of an increase from the
Yes.
state, and that's probably not going to change anytime in the near future. Now, maybe through the House and the Senate, they'll increase Chapter 70, maybe they'll go up to $40 or $50 a student. We might pick up a little bit more. Same with transportation, but I'm not.
That's interesting because of the relationships between the towns and how the budgets have to work out when you compare the MLC numbers. Does that force one of the towns to be in a penalty eventually? If they don't pay enough with MLC?
No, well, it could, potentially that could happen, but you have to remember both towns have that operational additional prior override money. It's around $2 million. Once that's zero, that's when they would be in a problem.
Right.
But until that goes to zero, they've got room to, to play and to cover things.
Okay.
So both towns are looking at what is our net increase? We paid you this much, how much more do you need next year? And they only can afford so much, which again, I understand, because their revenue is limited as well.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, because Mendon's MLC is so much lower, Upton's increase will be bigger than Mendon's, and it'll be, what happens is, in order to get Mendon up to say a higher number, Upton gets to a number he can't afford.
So
So
big
that's the
question.
balancing
It's
act.
very difficult to answer, and I apologize, but I have to ask it
Do you want me to
anyway.
make it up or just say
No,
it?
no.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, you can make it up if you want. It's probably just as good as anything.
Yeah.
But where do you think the MLCs are going next year?
In a year from now,
And
my guess is it's going to be just like this for about the next 3 or 4 years.
so the same amount. relative.
Similar amounts. This is about what it was last year too. I can't off the top of my head give you the exact amount, but it was pretty close to 500,000 for Upton and about 250 for Mendon.
Well, through so much economic instability and the fact that it's delayed by 2 years, the metrics that they come up with.
Right.
I'm wondering if we can come up with some sort of estimates to help the town out.
What potentially would help as far as Chapter 70 and the whole foundation budget is if our enrollment starts to go up and not down. This year, again, our foundation enrollment is down about 40 students. Eventually
An aggregate.
What?
You're talking about an aggregate.
Total.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe more in Upton and less in Mendon, as far as splitting it out. But until that total enrollment starts to go in the other direction, which I believe it's probably going to do in the next year or two, we're going to be a minimum district. By that, a minimum district means we're going to get the minimum aid.
Well, then there's the effect of the hold harmless stuff.
Yeah.
That we won't be up to the limit of, up to the point where they're pushed that.
They're not going to give us less.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. And I think that's it on this particular piece. I shared the year-to-date. I don't have any earth-shattering or, any eye-opening things to point out there. I would typically now give you a snow and ice update, but I will wait on that one.
Just till March 6th.
Yeah. But yeah, there's not, we're about where we should be this year. I think we're going to be in good shape as far as this year goes. And obviously, the more we can save, the more that helps us in years down the road when we're not getting the money from the state side. Any other questions on that?
That's it for me.
So now I'm all done. I can just.
No, because, yeah. So.
I shared it with
Pull up
Sam,
the-
so you have it
The
now.
facilities.
Yeah. All right, so here's our budget presentation for the facilities and operations. Typically, Ken would be here with me tonight. As you know, we got rescheduled from a few weeks ago, and Ken had already planned a long-needed vacation. So Ken is currently in Aruba, not here in the snow. So you get me, and hopefully I can answer the questions that you might have. And if not, I'll get you answers. We started out with quotes this year, and I thought about various things to come up with. Senator Everett Dirksen was somebody that I met once as a child. I think I irritated him because he wouldn't smile when I was trying to take a picture of him, and I was probably 8 at the time, so I told him to put his stuff down and smile, which went over well. But anyway, one of his phrases.
You're the same.
I have not changed. One of his phrases that I always liked was he had a statement that said, "$1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money." But I thought I'd leave that out of here and just mention it. But this is our philosophy in pretty much everything that I do, and Ken as well, is that we're fixed and unbending principles, except that we're flexible at all times, because you can't really do it all. And quite honestly, Ken sits with me almost every morning. I start my day with Ken, who updates me on what's going on in the buildings. And it amazes me how we thought we had this thing all set, and all of a sudden now there's this problem. The thing that amazes me is, in your house, things break, but it's not like every day something's breaking. Here, there's something a switch has stopped working, a valve is rusted, a pipe is leaking, the elevator is shut down, whatever it is, there's always something. As far as the budget and how we put it together, we look at a couple of things. Obviously, facility needs and increasing costs, which are going to drive the facility budget in general, is the first piece. Then we look at what we can do to upgrade the facilities, on a smaller scale, not a capital scale. And then we try to look forward to the things that we know are coming up. The principals, when they put the budgets together, were asked to give us some facility needs as well. Ken and I take that, he and I sit down, we put a budget together, and then we bring it and sit down with Maureen and go through it all and kind of tell her this is where we're at. We unfortunately cannot fund all the things that we probably need to fix, but there's a lot of things that are going on in the facilities. As far as things we've done and savings and things like that, I always like to talk about the net metering and solar stuff we've done. We have right now, our electric bills, with the exception of Nipmuc, all have credits on those bills of about $25,000. They'll get offset eventually, but that's because of the net metering. Now, yes, we are paying for the solar power, but we're paying, I want to say 10 cents in total a kilowatt hour for solar power, as opposed to, I'm sure you've all gotten your electric bills, and if you didn't lock into a price, you're paying about 40 cents a kilowatt or more. So we've done a really good job on that, and I think that's helped us a lot. We also lock in our pricing for energy supply. Even though we have solar, we still have to buy the electricity. We locked in at 9.5 cents about 2 years ago, and we're still in that contract. So again, where National Grid's at 33 cents right now, we're at 9, it's actually 9.6. We locked zero. What's that?
Missing a zero.
Zero where?
Yeah, you said that it says you're locked in at 96 cents.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And my jaw dropped when you flipped that slide.
We're locked in at 0.96 cents. You're absolutely correct.
Cent symbol.
Yeah. Nice pickup. And we locked in at heating oil at $3.29 a gallon, which is still better than what I've seen as far as the lowest rates. But 2 years ago we were at $1.67 a gallon. So for me, $3.29 is ridiculous, but it's still a good price. So we try to do that as much as we can in order to take advantage of pricing. We do a lot of preventative maintenance. Some of it I always, Ken always comes in and says, I got a company coming in to tune up all the doors. That's one of the things we do every single year, which when you think about it, what do you mean tune up the doors? Well, they go around and they make sure that all the hinges are working, the doors aren't sagging, the lock's working, the handle's working. And if we don't do that, they break and we pay more for them to come and fix it down the road. He does that with a lot of stuff. He goes around and, works on the boilers, on hot water tanks, everything in these facilities. I've never met anybody that knows so much about how these facilities work than him. So we do a lot of that. We did do an upgrade of all the lights to LEDs a few years ago, and that saved us quite a bit. The conversion to natural gas at Clough Memorial has saved us quite a bit. The boiler at Nipmuc, from what I could tell from the first couple of bills, we've cut our gas usage at about half. Now, this last bill I got was actually said we didn't use any gas at all. I don't believe the boiler's quite that efficient. If it is, I'd like to get it. I did call them. They asked me to call in the meter reading, which I did, and then they sent me a bill for $38,000 because they said that's how much gas we used. So I've sent it back to them, and they're going to fix that. But that's been a really good thing, and we'll hopefully, try to do as much of that as we can as we move to capital stuff. We've done a bunch of grants. We did state grants to do security cameras. We have green community grants that have done HVAC upgrades at Clough Memorial. We've had CPC funds that did the playground at Clough. We used a trust fund at Memorial to do the playground there. The Mendon CPC has funded money to redo the basketball court at Clough School, and they're going to put pickleball courts down as well, which I guess is the rage. I haven't played it yet, but if any of you have, apparently it's a lot of fun. So these are all things that are being upgraded on the facilities at the expense of, grants and other things that are available to us, and we take advantage of anything like that we can. When we talk about strengths and areas of growth, I will tell you that the number one strength that we have is Ken and his staff, and Ken especially, because as I said, he knows more. I mean, no matter what it is, he always tells me, well, this is what's wrong, this is what we have to do. And I'm thinking, well, how do you know this? But he does. That preventative maintenance, and one of the things Ken has developed over his 25 plus years of being here is he's got contractors that will come at the drop of a hat. He can call them and they're here in 2 hours. And that's really valuable because when you have something happen that potentially is going to close a building, to have the guys come and fix it right away means a lot. And that's really difficult to do. One of the issues we do have, though, is the HV energy management control system, especially at this school, is obsolete and antiquated. We did have somebody come in a couple of weeks ago and was able to do some adjustments to, because we're concerned that it's going to basically, stop working before we can do a major upgrade to it. And if that happens, then everything goes on manual and becomes much more expensive. So that's an area that we really need to work on, and we do the best we can. The capital plan, as you know, is in the works. I heard from the architecture firm that's working on that. They said they think they'll have it to us by the end of March. They've had a couple of delays, mostly weather delays. And they went through all the buildings with Ken, and Ken gave them a list, and they as well were shocked at how much they were able to get that they don't usually get out of a building by just going on their own, because he knows all these things. So he pointed out everything that he knows, which gives them a lot of background information to start looking at it. The other issue that we're having is we're having a hard time finding custodians, period. We've had a couple of leave this year. We've replaced one. We have yet to replace the other one. We have another person retiring in July, another person retiring, I think, the following summer possibly, but we're not getting good candidates right now. And I'm not sure if that's a salary thing, if it's a work thing, or if it's just the sign of the times that people just aren't applying for these jobs. So that makes it difficult because when you have, Clough School, for example, has 3 custodians. One goes on vacation for a week, now you're down to 2. If one of them were to leave and we couldn't replace them, I mean, that's the situation we're in at Memorial right now, is we're down to 3 where we used to have 4 there because we haven't been able to replace one of the positions. All right, as far as the FY20, that should say FY24. Boy, I got a lot of typos in this. Somebody should have checked that somewhere along the way. I can change it on mine, but it doesn't help.
We'll change it live. You keep talking.
Change it live, okay. What's that? Increasing costs for heating oil and gas is one of the things that's going to impact us. So we're looking for about another $56,000 in order to cover some of those costs. Control systems, we've spent quite a bit this year that we didn't budget for. We expect we're going to have more issues, so we've added some funding to that line. The water treatment system, we funded it in the budget, but a lot of that cost is rolling over, but we did add another $10,000 to that account as well. And I now that I'm getting the water bills from Upton for Nipmuc and Memorial, I'm not sure that we're budgeted enough to cover the cost of water, so that's gone up a little bit here. Building maintenance in general, we added $80,000 to those budgets, and that's because that's what we're spending. We were over budget at Nipmuc and I think Memorial in October or November, one of the schools I know for sure. So we've added some money there, and we only added $7,000 to field maintenance, but we probably should be adding more. I can give you an update, which actually I haven't even shared with Maureen yet, but as you know, we're trying to install a new well for the baseball and softball field. They have drilled down 700 feet so far and have yet to hit an adequate supply of water to power the well, which is not a good sign. It's just the way it is. I asked, Ken actually sent me a text from Aruba to tell me this morning, and then a picture of the beach he was on. So
How did he know that from Aruba?
Somebody must have texted him, and I actually had been talking to Mark King, who's the morning custodian here, and he had told me this Friday that they were down 500 feet. If they were at 3 gallons a minute at 500 feet, we need to be at anywhere between 35 and 50 gallons a minute. So we're not even close. So I think they're going to try and find another vein somehow. I don't know how that all works, how you drill through wells. It's not going as well as we had hoped. As far as future needs, I've mentioned it a couple of times. The HVAC computer management systems are a major need, really, at all 4 buildings. Water treatment systems are going to be costing us some money. We did apply for 2 grants, one for Clough and one for MISCO, that potentially will cover that entire cost. But we don't know if we're going to get those grants. We've got roof issues at all 4 buildings. We have carpets that need to be replaced at all 4 buildings. The athletic fields need some work. AC units, we've had to replace a couple at this school already. The auditorium one, when we did it several years ago at Nipmuc, it was almost $100,000. The one over the main office that does the main lobby, I believe the price that we got on that, because we were looking into it last year, was a little over $200,000. So all these things cost a lot of money. Capital needs, as you know, we're working on that list. And I think the one thing we need to throw out there, just that probably coming in the next 10 years, is that eventually Misco Hill's going to have to be replaced. It's an old school. It's got a lot of problems. So where that falls as far as how we do that, I don't know, but that is something we need to start talking about in the next probably 5 years. These are the things that we're hoping to do this summer. Now, a lot of this is going to hinge on us having leftover money in the budget. But as you see, the well at Nipmuc, that's going well right now. No pun intended. The parking lots are in really poor condition. If you park over in the parking lot, you can't even see the stripes anymore for the lines. We're getting prices right now to crack seal coat them, and restripe them all. The ramp to central office, that's kind of in a holding pattern right now. We're going to have BVT do the work. But they said they needed plans drawn up, so we had Habib and Associates start to work on plans, which when they got to 25% schematics, we sent it out to a cost estimator who came back with a price of $267,000. So that was put on hold immediately because we're not spending $267,000 on a ramp. So we're trying to look at alternative options now. We've got some curbs and stuff that are damaged at both Clough and Memorial, and that's just wear and tear. The curbs at both of those schools were just concrete. They're not granite like what was put in here, and they just don't hold up. And again, the buildings are 20 plus years old now, so we've gotten our life out of them. And roof stuff. Those are exterior stuff. Inside, we're still waiting for materials to do the PFAS treatment at Misco. The water control panel that determines how full the potable water tank is needs to be replaced, and we're working on that right now. We have some money in the ESSER grant that we budgeted for some of the carpets or tile at Misco, so we're looking at getting prices for that now. The auditorium stage floor at Misco is in deplorable condition. It's just in really bad shape. What we've been told by 2 people that have looked at it is it cannot be fixed. It has to be replaced. The replacement cost is like $32,000. We're trying to see if we can just do a kind of an overlay with a hardwood plywood, seeing what that would cost, or maybe even a poured epoxy floor or something that is more, will cover that floor that won't cost as much. But we need to do something there. We are planning on doing the gym floor here this summer, similar to what we did at Misco last summer, where they'll come and completely sandblast it down and redo it all, refinish it all. So those are the things we're working on. Again, it depends on what we have left from, because you can see when you add all that up, it's a fair amount of money. So that's the short-term and long-term stuff. Other things that we potentially are looking at, we don't have a generator at Misco. So obviously when the power goes out, there's no water. And when there's no water, there's no bathrooms. And apparently that's not good. The track at Misco is in really bad shape. It really needs to be excavated out and refilled. We're going to start to look at that at some point. The irrigation system for the baseball and softball that this new well would feed also needs to be replaced because it's got all kinds of dirt and stuff. It's just, because of the way it was constructed, it just doesn't work well anymore. The first step is get the well going, see if we can blow out the lines and clean them out so that they work again. And if we don't, we may have to look at that as well. And the AC units, carpets, the intercom systems at all the schools. They're marginal at best. They're very expensive to replace. These are all things that I think are going to go on to the capital plan. Unit ventilator shutoff valve, that's something we've had to replace a few at Misco. If something breaks on the unit ventilator, you have to shut the water off to the entire building. You can't just isolate that building. So what we try to do when we have to fix them is shut the water off and put a shutoff valve at each unit so that we can actually do one unit at a time and not shut the whole building down. Lighting in the auditoriums needs some work. We had an issue here that I think Simon was able to fix. If you're in the auditorium at Misco, it's just dark and dingy. Needs better light. So those are things that are all kind of just, in our minds as things that we need to do. So it's a lot. And that's about all I got to say about
When do we think
facilities.
we'll have the initial pass of the capital
I
plan?
didn't hear you.
When do we think we'll have the initial?
End of
plan?
March.
Yeah, end of March, and that's, their full report, so then I think that triggers us starting to meet as a capital planning subcommittee to go through that information and the list that's been put together here and start to prioritize. And Jay and Ken have already put together a list with more details than, what we have here to get us started as well.
Yeah, I mean, the long-range plan on that is the debt we currently have, FY '24 is the last year, and that's gone. We would probably be looking to replace that or do something in FY '25 or '26, or even both. Excuse me. First we need to get a capital assessment, see what we're looking at. We probably cannot do 100% of everything because, first of all, renovate, like if we wanted to renovate Misco again, you might have to shut it down. I'm not sure it's worth it. But even the other three buildings, there's a lot of work that you're gonna have to do in stages because you can't, like, let's say we had enough money to replace the carpets in this whole room. I'm not sure you could accomplish that in one summer. So you probably have to do it over a couple of years.
Just don't have enough information right now. We need the capital plan.
Yeah, right. That's long-range planning. Short-range planning, we try to knock off stuff as it comes up. We try to hit things each year that we can hopefully fix, if we have money left. But it's really a money-driven thing in that, okay, we finished really good this year. We've got money. We can invest in a couple of these things to fix them. We've tried to do that, especially where there's safety concerns. You have to, like the stairs that we had to fix over here by the athletic wing at Nipmuc, that, we can't have people getting hurt. Any other questions?
Nope. This time.
Okay, so I'm dismissed now. Thanks.
Thank you.
We're gonna be over here because we're cool.
No, please.
What do you want to say?
That is all you, boss.
Thanks.
Smile for the camera.
Cue me up. I'll get that. You already had it up. Should talk about the fourth utility.
Yeah, so like Jay, I had several quotes, including a meme I wanted to use, but I was told that I was not able to use it. Probably better judgment. But what played around with a couple different quotes here, and I think the one thing that we really want to stress was that there's a shift from our perspective that technology has moved from a nice to have, an add-on, an enhancement to essentially a utility. We could conduct school theoretically without heat and coats on. We could, do school without the lights off, but it's really not practical. And in the same ways, it's not practical to, play with any of the other utilities, heat, water, electric. Technology has become so essential to what it is that we're doing. We're part of framing this conversation is a shift from how we're operating from technology as an additional enhancement to an essential and planning accordingly. So we just want to kind of frame this around the argument that technology is the fourth utility. That leads us into our budget prioritization. So we saw these as building blocks. First, we want to start off with sustaining what we have. So ensuring that teachers and students have a understanding of what they had this year at a minimum will be here next year. We don't want to have teachers and students feel like the rug's been pulled out from underneath them. Once we build our budget, we look at the end of the school year at the utilization data and we go through the reevaluating process. One prime example is we were providing IXL to every single elementary teacher. The data didn't support that. So what we do is we reduce the licenses accordingly, which allows us to put more money back into the budget for innovation for new pilot programs. So we're constantly going through the sustaining, reevaluating, and then innovating. If we are going to start pulling resources that we know teachers are using, but just not at scale, let's just take Nearpod for the sake of example. We try to give teachers at least a year-long leeway to say, hey, this is on the block, and we either need like a enhanced effort from teachers and students to use it, or we may be phasing that out. We try to keep that communication open. We're also formalizing a process to have a better evaluation process through a partnership with DESE and the Learning Accelerator. And so that leads us into kind of the 35,000 foot view, which Joe will lead off.
So the overview right now, basically where we are we're pretty stable with our internet infrastructure, our desktops. Our teacher laptops are actually on a lease that's coming up at the end of 24. You might remember from back in the original, first COVID discussions, we actually had a full swap of the teacher MacBooks during COVID, which was an exciting experience. And then our internet costs are also kind of wrapped into that same kind of cycle. We've tried to build it out so it's a 4 to 5 year cycle, and depending on either the equipment or the leases or the whatever model that we were using for whatever piece of it, the internet costs come through, it's driven by E-rate, because we have to go through, that's a federal process, it's a federal purchasing process that we have to go through. I just rebid the internet connection at Bisco Hill. That's actually going to hit us in 24. Some changes in that, which I've already worked through with Jay on the numbers on. It's a pretty minimal hit, but we were able to get a much faster internet connection, and will hold us off for the term of 3 to 4 years on that. As far as the other things, we've kind of built the leases around the past practice, what's worked for us. The teacher laptops we do on 4 year. The iPads, we're starting to look at funding models for those, which, Dave and I will both talk about a little bit. The secondary iPads are on a 2 to 3 year runway before they're going to run out, and we're going to need to replace. The elementary iPads, you might remember back in COVID fog, that we did, the two towns brought us some money in one of the grants. I don't remember which one. Jay will remember off the top of his head. CARES Act. They caught us, we were able to buy iPads for the elementary schools, which at the time only had classroom sets. This was able to fully fill out the one-to-one all the way down to kindergarten. Those devices, FY24 is the last year of the life cycle on those. So we're going to be looking to do something with those.
Then asking, what's the use level of an elementary iPad?
Every day, essential that they're using it for ST Math for practice there. There are Lexia for as early as our kindergarten students, all the way through 4th grade. They're using it to document their learning in some classes with Seesaw, taking pictures. It's a home communication tool. I think taking iPads out of the classroom would be like taking a smartboard out of the classroom for teachers at this point.
So do they go home with the students?
No.
They're just for classroom?
Yes, and we did that intentionally. We originally allowed the devices to go home because of COVID and for their hybrid model. Sam, bless him, spent quite a summer cleaning Cheetos and cookies and everything else, and things you probably don't want to know off of iPads. I was working in a 2nd grade classroom today, and we still haven't solved that problem entirely. But I feel like we've gotten...
Snack is a problem.
Yeah, but it shows they're getting used. So we've been able to sustain the life cycle of an elementary iPad by keeping them in the classroom. And
they definitely get more of a beating at the elementary level, just if they're going back and forth. We noticed that right away, and we kind of adjusted that with the administrations in both buildings and said, this is the way it's got to go. And because of that, we've prolonged them. We've made them a little more stable, especially when the devices are out of production now. It's hard to get replacement parts and replacement work on them.
Thank you.
Great question. The inflationary costs that are hitting the app market we're starting to feel now with the app models have changed a little bit. It used to be you bought your app, you owned your app, you got updates for free. They've moved that to you can download our app for free, but if you want the updates and you want some of the content or you want something else, there's a fee that goes with that every year. And that's where we get the logins and stuff. That's like the ST Math or, whatever products you're.
Yeah, Seesaw, just for the sake of example, we're paying 5 and change for Seesaw at the quote, because of all the hard work that's gone into updating Seesaw is now going to be at $7 a student. So that would be one that we got to take a look and see what the usage data looks like. The other model is that we got another one from Edpuzzle that gives teachers free access, but they are now capping usage, not just based on the teacher. So the teacher got X, let's say, gigabyte worth of space. It's now by the school. So you register your school. And so now they hold the entire school hostage and blast out emails to the teacher saying, make sure your tech director knows that you're running out of space. So there's all sorts of different ways that these organizations are trying to make a profit. Some a little bit more ethical than others. But.
So far, so good. I mean, we've been able to absorb most of these increases in this year without any major, hiccups. Dave's reworked it with different vendors. He's, put a few under the gun and said, hey, we need to get this down to a number that works. But we're just planning for the future at this point, that we know that it's not just one vendor that's doing this, it's a lot of them now. And, we need to adjust ourselves accordingly. The last piece here too, the projectors and smart boards, we bring this up kind of as a side note every year. We are at the point now where a lot of them are failing. And, smart board, originally when we installed them, like if you remember the one that used to be here on the wall, that's the similar style that we have at the elementary level. It's a 2-part board. It's got a projector. It's big. It's bulky. They were $10,000 new. We're working through trying to find cheaper alternatives to those that still work with the software that the staff is trained on, so we don't have to go down a professional development route with them. But in general, there's a lot of devices that we're starting to see them fail, especially projectors, even in this building and at the middle school. I mean, they're just hitting 10 years old, and we put a lot of bulbs in them. Felipe's great at getting up there with a vacuum and cleaning them out, and we've kept them going as long as we can. But I think we need to address that. Jay and I bounced some ideas around on how we can do that with some grant money, some outside sources. But in the end, some of it's going to end up in the budget. So we just kind of want to set the stage for that and have the conversation.
So the ROI, and that's just kind of a difficult question to answer, thinking it from a utility standpoint, because it's just become so essential. But just to kind of capture it as best we could, the return on the investment is that there's been all federal grant dollars that have paid for our entire device access for our students. We've also used grants to pay for our new programming. For the automation robotics is a big example between the Project Lead the Way grant and the Inspired Innovation Center. It came at no cost to the district. We've also provided on-demand access to the whole world of learning by putting these devices in students' hands. And also because of the platform Clever in particular, we can extend the learning day because now students have access to the platforms so they can practice math with SD Math or reading with Lexia. And just finally, the return is better engagement with the community. Our Project Lead the Way, our PBL units, and our Inspired Innovation Family Workshops allow us to better connect with students and families, so we get the return there as well.
So maybe a simpler way of saying it is we couldn't actually deliver the educational experience we have today without all of this.
You could, but it'd be like
No, you couldn't.
you could deliver education, but you couldn't do it in any way, much like you could run school without electricity, but it's unfathomable.
Well, it improves the efficiency of education to the point where you couldn't fit all you can fit in to a year. You can't today.
Yeah, and just the transformation of the, it's transformational.
So, as far as reductions, efficiencies, savings, things we've been doing, kind of the leaderboard one there, we started sharing services with the town of Upton. One of the members from our department, Chris Karen, is split between us and the town of Upton right now. It's working out pretty well. We're having I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the town side. They really like having them there. It's given us an opportunity to add basically a half of a person into the department because the town of Upton has picked up half of Chris. And overall, our department's still kind of in the lean category as far as I see it anyway. We added all of the iPads at the elementary level. We didn't add any real staffing down there, so we had to kind of readjust how we have coverages in the buildings during the week. For example, Sam will start at Nisco Hill, but he also starts to cover Clough and, sometimes has to come here. So there's a lot of people moving around to kind of cover all the bases. Dave and I were talking this morning, we had Liz Black, our data manager who does like Power School stuff. She was taking calls at Memorial the other day for tech stuff, fixing smart boards and, tagging in as needed. Felipe is just like a a vision sometimes for me. He just kind of is running around all day, and I see him here, I see him there, he's everywhere. So it's we're running pretty lean, but we are getting stuff done still. Could we be more efficient with more staff? Sure. Could we be delivering a better product to the folks here in the building, the students? They can probably speak a little more to help desk availability. We try to be there as much as we can, but sometimes we're always trying to cover break or something else to get the most people and the most coverage we can. You want to talk about the Pathways grant?
Yeah, and then just trying to reiterate that we're continually writing new grants to provide the new programming. So we hope to have an Innovation Pathways and Implementation grant that'll bring in $75,000. We're writing new grants for ST Math to expand that to 5th and 6th grade. And then Joe just wrote a cybersecurity grant to fund.
We were just awarded. So cybersecurity grant just gives us some penetration testing, some reporting, some options to kind of intentionally phish some of the employees to see who's giving up data they shouldn't be, stuff like that. And it creates a nice report that's easy for us to have a good conversation with somebody about, maybe you shouldn't be sharing your passwords with questionable people on the internet. But also just kind of seeing where there's stuff we've missed. We focus a lot on the staff, and we focus a lot on the administration and folks that are, have sensitive data in front of them. We don't always necessarily, think about like the custodian that also has an email account and could be doing something that gets out there. So that's what this grant is about. It's funded by the state from the Executive Office of Technology and Security Services through the Office of Municipal and School Tech, and it's they provide us the software free of charge, and the town of Upton already belongs to that community compact grant. They've been doing it on the town side for a few years, and the reporting is really good from what I've seen. So excited about that. The other thing is we're going into year 2 of is this currently year 2? The iPads that we bought on the ECF grant, like Ms. Clark has over there. That's that style iPad. So we have 2 more years on that equipment before we can action on anything with it. Those devices we bought those with AppleCare and with the case. That's the kind of the keyboard laptop-y style one. Excellent over there. So we've got her trained. She does a great job. Fantastic that looks. Thank you. So yeah, I mean that's where we're at on that. We're talking about the digital. You already talked about.
Yeah, we're just kind of showing the efficiencies, things we've already touched. I think we can move on to the next one.
Strengths. I would say we're very strong in the fact that we have the infrastructure for the internet. We've gotten down pretty well at this point. We've been through a few upgrades on the Wi-Fi. We've been through a few upgrades on the hardwire side, and we're looking at I believe next year the lease is ending on the wireline equipment that runs the Wi-Fi that we have. We did some server upgrades this year. We've done some readjustments, things behind the scenes you don't see, but keep the Wi-Fi running so that when you walk in, everything works. The internet lines, we've worked with the vendors pretty. We have a really good relationship with our internet vendors. They've kept the internet up and running for us. The iPads at the secondary level, those are, like we said, fairly brand new. So we're kind of like halfway through their life cycle. And then, we've run the department pretty lean, so we're not spending a ton of money on personnel, but we're still delivering something that resembles IT and not, people screaming and running with their hair on fire. So, David, want to talk about growth?
Yeah, so for areas for growth, and we're going to get into this next slide, having a stable funding mechanism for our iPads and our student devices, and then our digital displays. We need an area to review and reinvest our software, so we're hopeful, as I mentioned earlier, that DESE Learning Accelerator project will have a little bit more of a formalized, transparent process. And then, just ensuring that we're having competitive compensation. We did lose somebody recently to a better paying job. We want to make sure that we are able to retain our excellent people, give them growth pathways. But right now under that structure, it's a little bit of a challenge. We've got excellent people like Sam, Felipe, Liz, and it allows us to provide that excellent customer service that we strive to provide, and we just want to make sure that is sustainable as well. All right, so here's the big ask. I'll start kind of at the bottom. I provided a link to the replacement cycle in case you want to go into the weeds of what device is good until what point, and then when we would replace the actual devices. And I have a full spreadsheet about the payment cycles for this as well. But the reality is that we're asking for $200,000 for the first stage of an iPad refresh. What that would do would be setting a standard where a student who is in grade 1, grade 5, and grade 9 would receive a device. That would carry them through their school experience at the elementary, middle, high school level. We'd also be providing kindergartners with iPads that would stay in the classroom. Those would be refreshed once every 4 years. The second stage would be for another $200,000 that would help us to fill the perpetual lease cycles. The reality of it is if we decide to buy out the devices every year, so we buy for grade 1, 9, and grade 1, 5, and 9, or if we lease, it's going to cost about $400,000 annually between the buying or a 4-year lease cycle. So any way you slice it, all roads lead to the $400,000 number. If we do it in the stages, we'll be able to break that up over 2 years and then phase in to get everybody where they need. We would have no device that would go outside of the 4-year use cycle. So we would have a mechanism that would allow us to backfill some of our older iPads into our elementary hands. So that way, those students who are in first and second grade, who have like a 3-year-old device now, would get the appropriate upgrade before they were scheduled to. It would be a used device still. But this model would allow us to have a perpetual cycle where we wouldn't have to think about it much like we're on a cycle with the desktops, with the laptops, and it shifts it from a capital expense to an operating expense.
For us, I think too, it also gives us we're breaking this into smaller bites, and we're not going out for, when we were buying this stuff before off of grants, we were getting it at $500,000 at a time. Now we're getting it, at a $200,000 number that we can build off of in the regular budget without going for something crazy that would, just blow our numbers out of the water. I also kind of think the way we've been shuffling the equipment around is costing us money. Just operationally, where we have to, Sam has to go collect equipment. We have to take everybody off of another project, move them around, reconfigure to get devices into the hands of the right students. So, when they're graduating in, this year, next year, when she hands in her device, I have to take it home, or we have to bring it back into the shop, and we have to figure out, okay, where's this going to go? It's going to go to the kindergarten. We have to reconfigure. There's time, money. It's just a waste of time and money that we're doing on this. In this model, now we're setting up a natural move with everything that we can kind of find some cost savings in the amount of time that we're putting into, and we running in that lean department model that's useful to us, gratefully.
This work would have to be done in the summer, and given the size of our team, 3 to 4 classes about what we can do when you factor in the collection, reorganization, redistribution, setup. There's a lot of touch points on it. One other piece of this too is this is the 200, the ultimate 400 does not include any of the residual value. We purposely budgeted assuming that there's no residual value, but we anticipate there'd be about $50,000 to $70,000 of residual value at the end of each of the 4 years that would help to either offset or provide some stability for spare iPads or things of that nature.
You'll see that it's in that actual, Dave blew out all those numbers and put them all on paper. It's not a very good clean slide to show here tonight, so that's why we included it in there for your own amusement. Or if you really just need to go to bed later. It's easy to get lost in the numbers.
So I have the full popsicle headache spreadsheet with the cost per year based on the number of students and color coding and when they'd be replaced, which I'm happy to share with you, but it's a little overwhelming at times. And then just to kind of ride out, so the future needs, Joe can take that.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of glossed over it, but it's still there on the top of my mind is, projectors and smartboards. They're just the oldest bit of equipment that we own right now. It's not on any kind of, lease cycle or any kind of replacement plan. We've just been replacing them as they go. Luckily, Smart has been pretty good about supporting even the, really old 10-year-old hardware. So, we've been fortunate there. The projectors, we've just been replacing them with whatever new market projector I can find out there that works with, the devices we have. AV equipment, this is kind of a new zone for us. We hadn't dealt with we've got a lot more AV requests, TVs, rolling carts with projectors and cameras and audio and, just a lot of stuff that, IT computer guys like us, we just kind of look at and go, okay, we'll figure that out. We've been figuring it out for a while. It's getting to be a little bit overwhelming just from a departmental standpoint of trying to deal with those things individually. I think it's something we need to look at as a whole and try and decide how we, either staff appropriately so we have somebody if we are going to deal with it. If not, how do we bring in external personnel to deal with that kind of stuff. Live streaming equipment, you're seeing a cobbled together, this is the best we're going to do kind of thing. We just want to make sure that at some point we might want to look at bringing in a professional company to actually give us, a real plan for what we should be doing if this is going to be what we're doing from the future.
We've run into situations, I think there is more of an expectation to be providing these live streaming events. So whether it be start with school committee meetings, but then it was the school safety night, then we had graduation. And while I think it's much like the discussion we were having, Mr. Chair, earlier about, can we do these things? Yes, but we can do it by rigging up a mini microphone to a polycam and trying to, it's a minimum viable product. And I think that if we want to continue to offer these types of participatory events, even think about the budget hearing last year, Dr. Cohen, where we were trying to figure out a way for the live stream to come over the intercom and still hear you all on the microphones. We're running into the boundaries of what is possible versus what the expectation is. And so I think we need to take a deeper look at providing that kind of infrastructure in the buildings. And we've been over the long-term projections and planning. It's all been in here. So we're just going to use this as kind of our pause slide to answer any sort of questions that you have.
Thank you for the detailed plan and the scenarios. That really helps a lot understand how we can spread the investment out. Appreciate that.
We're mindful of the ask. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we know it's a lift. And we're grateful for all the investment that the community does put into technology. And we're being more appreciative of, if we can move this into operating expense.
We also wanted to make it so that it's clean and it's something we can predict and plan for, and we're not coming to you for chunks and pieces and trying to jigsaw something together that works. It's like we have the time to plan. This is what we should be doing.
And I understand you right. You're basically saying you're looking for $200,000 a year for the update student devices.
$200,000 for this phase one, then another $200,000 next year for 400. The 400 will allow us to continue the cycle.
No, but I guess my question is, what's the cost to replace them all?
It's on the slide there.
It's $1.3 million.
About that much in inventory.
So you're looking at $200,000 for this cycle for, say, this year, and then another.
Sure. Yep.
It was $1.3 million across 4 years. Got it. Okay. That's why I wasn't fully clear on that.
No, I just want to thank Dr. Cohen and Mr. Byer and Dr. Kirkpatrick just for their input and helping us kind of think through what would be feasible or what would possibly be feasible to the committee and the community. It's a complex, it's kind of one of those wicked problems to try to make work.
Talking about it for a while.
Thank you very much. Unless there's other questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. Mid-year data review.
There's a lot going on at this meeting.
There's a lot.
Ready to roll? All right, so hold on a minute. I'm timing. So in the spirit of trying to be brief, I'll also say that sometimes when I do this, I like forget to say things that I've planned to say because I'm trying to be brief. If I do that, don't hesitate to ask questions or we can talk later, but we'll try to go through this. I too started with a quote, even though I didn't know that was a rule. This came from actually one of our educators, and part of this is just about, you can flip to the next slide, Sam. We've been talking about our use of data and the building of our use of data all year. And so I shared this slide with you at the last presentation. There we are in February. We've been talking about not only what the results say, but also how we use it. Again, Sam? This will be more of a presentation about how we're using the data, rather what the results are, as opposed to how we're using the data. But you see that I keep coming back to this because that's really what the use of data is all about. Data is only good if you use it well. This is one of these presentations where I'll try to kind of pause, again, Sam, thanks, at a very appropriate time where we can talk about formative assessments, which is a really important part of what all educators do all the time. And we're talking about it tonight because we just finished our iReady diagnostic, and that not only is a really important investment in terms of how we use data, but also it's something that's across K through 8. So we can talk about it with our educators. We can do some of the work that we talked about with data cycles in the last meeting with this stuff. But I want to underscore, it's just one piece of the pie. And I don't want iReady to essentially take all of our attention because so much of what we do relies on formative assessment. That's what we do as educators, is we try to set goals and help our kids learn certain things, certain aspects of the curriculum. And we ask ourselves constantly, how are we doing? How are we doing? And if we're not hitting those, we're adjusting. And so kids have assessments every single day. I mean, in the form of exit tickets, in the form of questions from teachers, but this particular one, I think it's appropriate that we pause a minute just to see some of the results because of the fact that it's so comprehensive across K through 8. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to share the results in two ways. One is to focus on the actual results in terms of grade level placement, and the other is to focus on growth, which is my favorite. The grade level placement, I've broken down by schools. So this is Clough's first display. And I'm just going to point out some things that you'll see in some of the other displays. One is that the fall results reside underneath the diagnostic winter results. And so you can see where we were at the start of the fall when the kids took the test the first time, and then where we are now in the winter. And so, and you can look at these slides more carefully as we go, but the thing that you'll notice is that in terms of grade level placement, which again, isn't the thing that I put the most stock into, but is, an important part of this, we've seen a change from fall to winter pretty dramatically. And you'll see that my noteworthy observations are the same across both elementary schools, which is pretty awesome because they really have had very similar results through this diagnostic. So another thing that I think is worthy of pointing out is that the red, where are the students that are the most below grade level right now, those percentages of kids that are in those areas actually conform to the MTSS framework in the sense of how we're, the proportionality of how we're supposed to be operating. And I think that that is important here too. And I think worthy of pointing out, even though you'll see that one of the things that I think is important for you and the community to understand is that that group of students grows over time. And that's natural because there is a tendency for some kids to not make progress and some kids to make more than average progress. And so the distribution starts spreading out over time and it's normal. But on average for the elementary school, that's fabulous. These slides, I ended up creating because they didn't have this display in our diagnostics, but what they show you is something that you all have asked me about, and I thought that it would be good to present this way. It shows essentially on average the grade level results and distribution compared to the Massachusetts results, not the national norm, even though I'll show you a display with that. But it shows that in every single grade level in ELA and in math, flip it again, that Mendon-Upton, which is on the left-hand side of both of the double bars, our results are better than the state in every grade in both subjects, okay? So I thought that's worth pointing out. I also think it's worth pointing this out to you, which you'll see later. This is a good slide to see it on. If you were to kind of do the eye doctor test and like cover one of those two bars so that you're only looking at the right-hand bar, and then you did that for every pair of graphs, you'd see that the green changes from grade to grade, okay? That is not because second graders across Massachusetts are doing worse necessarily than first graders across Massachusetts. This is a factor of the assessment. And I think that's a really important thing because sometimes when we look at assessments, we're not really sure what we're comparing. And we look at things like, oh, well, the kids don't have the same results in fifth grade or sixth grade or what have you. But sometimes there's a piece of this that's about this assessment and what we're comparing it to. So I think it's important that you see that and that you see that in Mendon-Upton. Our green bars are longer than the state bars, no matter where the state bars are at. Okay, so if we flip again. This is Misco Hill's results. Misco Hill, we don't see as much of the change in grade level placement at this point, but that is masking some tremendous growth, which I'll show you in a minute. We do see that the grade level placements have increased from fall to winter, both in ELA and math. And one thing that I thought was a noteworthy observation is that this year in math in particular, 5% more of students are on grade level and 3% fewer are in the red, basically. So, and that's compared to last year at this time. And there are increases for ELA too. I didn't stick them in. It's a 1% increase on grade level for ELA, and it's a 5% decrease in the red, which I think is noteworthy as well. I also mentioned in both slides, and you can take a look at this, that iReady gives us specifics on domains. And in two of the domains that we happen to be focusing on, both at the elementary level and the middle school level, we're seeing results in those domains. So this tool is helping us create that focus, and then the work that supports it seems to be showing that it's working. So these again are the comparisons to the state level results. And again, Mendon-Upton has better results in comparison to the state averages. I'll point out again, the red increases over time. You'll see that Mendon-Upton's off-grade level students are fewer than the states as well, but that trend of the bars kind of increasing over time is normal, and you can see it through the state average. Not that we're not working on that, right? Like that's something that we always want to pay attention to, but in any event. And you can go again. So here's the growth charts, and I really need to speed up. The growth charts display national norm percentile versus growth percentile, the mean of growth, okay? The thing that I like about iReady is that they calculate two forms of growth for us. One is typical growth, and one is stretch growth for every student. For typical growth, they end up basically identifying an amount that a student who tested in the fall at a certain score should grow in terms of being typical for kids who scored at that score. So that means that typical growth changes depending on how you score in that first assessment. And that's one of the reasons why I like this. It gives you 1 to like wherever your target is. That's the 100 percentile, right? But you'll see that on the left line, it goes up to 130. And that's because sometimes kids grow way more than their typical growth, right? In fact, that's what we want when we talk about stretch growth ultimately. The important part about these two graphs is both in ELA and math, Mendon-Upton is in the quartile that you want us to be in. We are both beyond the 50 percentile rank in the national norms, and we're above average in terms of growth percentile. So we're there. And if you go, I'll get into some of the other details. What I did here is I just compared growth from 2022 to 2023 in ELA and math for the elementary schools. And I feel like really the story here is the results in terms of the growth are pretty similar from year to year. Like, that's not what I'm trying to call out. The growth in ELA is more than math, but they're similar. And they're good. They were good last year. We saw the results in the MCAS. They're good this year. And you can see that in terms of the percentage of kids who have already met their growth target, which means that they've already made 100% growth for typical growth at this point in the year. We've got a greater percentile of that in both this year, both for ELA and
So that's based on individual target.
Yes.
It's not based on group, because I'm just trying to
Understand it.
track back to the other charts, because it's really stuff on the other charts is more about the group.
Yeah, when it says 26% have already made their target, it means that 26% of the kids have made 100% of the growth. There's some kids that maybe made 90 and 80 and whatever. Those guys aren't factored into those percentages. What I was trying to call out is that already in February, 26 and 34% of the kids at the elementary school have made 100% of growth through this measure.
So that's comparing growth against similarly scoring students from the fall.
That's right. And that's another thing that I point out. Actually, maybe we can just flip through because I'm really running. I've got 11 seconds left. All right. So Misco Hill, this is something that I thought was worth calling out. The growth at Misco Hill this year has really actually been dramatically improved. And, there's a lot of reasons why. And I think one of the big reasons is because they're really focusing on this data and using it like at a tier 1 level to think about their instruction. And you can see that even the big jump, because sometimes the percentile, the medians mask what's really going on here. But when you call out how many kids have actually made the 100% of the growth in comparison, you see that even if the percentile is looking at 2 different distributions, that we're still seeing 48% having made 100% of typical growth and 33% in math. Okay. And if you flip again, this is kind of getting to what you were asking about, I think, Matt. So, or alluding to, is that every student has a different growth target, basically, and they're in bands, right? So students who score well below a grade level, they are expected to make more growth in a year, and their stretch growth is even more.
If it's based on historical cohort data, though, doesn't you have the left behind problem where the kids who are scoring low tend to, you have your equality and your equity problem, where kids who are scoring lower don't make the same growth that you desire, fall farther and farther behind.
Well, so
and if you're using your growth metrics against similar cohorts, you're not necessarily measuring the growth that you want to see. You're just seeing they're doing better than the similarly potentially struggling other students who are also all behind you. You understand what I'm saying?
I think I do, but I think that's where the stretch growth comes in, right? Because if you only made typical growth, this is let me try to reframe what I hear you saying. Like, if there is a typical growth for somebody who starts below grade level, and that typical growth isn't great, right? You might say, oh, that student will just continue to be behind and continue to be behind, because if they're just making that average growth for that group, then they're never going to get ahead. Which is why the stretch growth is so important, right? Because the stretch growth is the idea that if you start here and your typical growth, which is still a useful metric, right, is like, are you doing as well as the kids who scored effectively similar to you? If you get the stretch growth, then you're making gains towards shrinking that gap. And so that's really what we want to see. In fact, this slide gets at that a little bit, and so does the next one. Don't switch it yet, though. one of the things I cut out in this is I cut out the very bottom grade level category, and that's because there are so few kids at the elementary level in this category that the results of one student or another really swing the percentages, and it didn't seem to be like a useful metric. So I cut that one out, and I wanted to tell you explicitly why I did, so you wouldn't think it was like an omission intentionally. But the rest of the categories, you can see the percentages of kids who have made the typical growth. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that the kids who are 2 grade levels below, their percentages are higher. Okay, so what that says to me is that they're getting closer to the stretch growth, right? Those kids are growing at a rate where hopefully more of them will get to the stretch growth point. They'll, all 51% of those kids have already made typical growth. So any more growth that they experience for the rest of the year is their stretch growth, which will hopefully shrink those gaps that you're talking about. And if you flip it again, you can see this for the middle school as well, and you see the same kind of trend, okay? And so the last slide, I'm over time, but these are the things that like really are why we're here, right? So we've been using this data all year at the elementary and middle levels in teams, working on inquiry, focusing on tier 1 instruction, and also on interventions, as you heard at the last presentation. We'll be doing some vertical teaming at PD in March, where we'll be able to get teachers together and talk about a specific area of focus that has been derived from the data and talk about how that builds over time. And we're doing a lot with talking to each other about what other types of assessments we use, and also how this data comes into a picture of building our understanding of the whole student. As we talked about in a different presentation, this piece of it I think is particularly important, because when you think about those variables, we want to be able to have teachers not just see iReady and think about that, but also when they don't see the growth that they're expecting, be able to ask themselves why. And it could be related to the SEL data, and it could be related to other things, health data, and things that the educator needs to know to be able to really identify the right next steps. So it's like 2 minutes over.
So the growth data, that's an iReady black box to you, right? Where the kids take the test at the beginning of the year, they take the test later, and it spits out it's how much growth that they've seen relative to their peers, right? You don't actually have any input or any insight into how that number is calculated.
We have insight, and I can share with you like a technical report on it. They share that but we don't have the ability to change their metrics. That's right. Like they designed their growth metrics. And
if you wanted to by hand calculate that, do you have that level of insight, or is it's more black box than that?
We should be able to. They'd have to give us some of the data, like they'd have to give us what those average growth are, and like we don't have access to that. Those are national, through their national data sets. But we should be able to match it up. I haven't.
Well, that was going to be my question. Is how I think it's related to what you're saying. It's like if they determine the grade level achievement, whatever that is. They determine that? They determine what that grade level is? Or are they determining it for every education system across the United States? How is that determined?
It's based on national norms. So it's like similar, and it's somewhat similar to, like in some ways, what Massachusetts does too, right? Whereas with their growth metric is they have to basically say, well, how can we create something where there's we know what the expectation is for growth. And so what they do is they take kids who scored similarly, and then they look at them over the course of time. They say, oh, last year, all this group in this area, on average, this was their growth. This was and it's really a median. It's not an average, but they say this was their growth. And they basically then, over time with thousands and thousands and thousands of kids, they say this would be the typical growth. Now, it's more complicated than that. Like there's technical papers that go through the calculations, but in essence, that's what's happening. And then they assign a stretch growth which is essentially what they would expect maybe the child to be able to do to start to shrink that gap. And it's set so it becomes a target for educators, not so that necessarily it gets them to grade level, right? Because they will readily say that that's really hard for some kids with where they're starting, right? So it's an over the course of time, how educators should be looking at this to try to gauge how effective they're being.
So in our use of data, we're making an assumption that the use of data, I think it's a good assumption, that the use of data is going to improve our ability to teach and the outcome for kids. Is there any control group or an opportunity to compare against a control group that maybe schools don't use data? Is there any way to do that so we can see what actually is going on, prove to ourselves that we're doing the right thing?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure
that was a really touchy question.
The natural experiment is out there, and that the education researchers who do this kind of thing for a living, PhD programs and stuff, have found that data and have written those papers. It is a pretty, the way that this stuff kind of rolls out naturally does kind of produce a pretty.
Well, it'd be nice to definitively say that we made a hypothesis, we went on the best information, we started accomplishing a goal of use of data, and here's exactly what it is accomplishing. That would be nice.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it's a legitimate question. Like, everyone wants to be able to answer that in experiment style, right? And there are so many factors to that too, right? Because the way that we use it, or the types of conversations that we have, or the frequency with which we do, like, all of those things might impact the results of that. But given that you said that I think that those types of things are worth looking at and talking about. And there are doctoral candidates who are looking for projects, and we have a couple of them in here.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So.
Okay, cool.
Good.
Other questions? Thank you. All right, on to old business. The 2023-2024 draft school calendar. I don't know if people want to have a debate about this, want to add some extra school days, maybe take away weekends, right?
I know.
I think our student representatives made a pretty clear point. Eliminate weekends, school all the time.
Well, I hear some school districts are going to 4-day weeks.
Ooh, that's pretty good too.
There's some work environments going 4 days.
We did this week.
We did this week. Do a 4-day week. All right. Well, then on that, I don't know do we need any more debate on this? Are people comfortable to vote on it?
Can I?
Sure.
Throw something in there. So my recommendation, I feel like we probably internally want maybe one last review, because I got some feedback from the association, like right before the meeting, in most cases, but I haven't had a chance to talk with them just to get that feedback. So I think we didn't have the school committee meetings on the last one. We added those in. If you could take a look at those dates, they're traditional what we've had, but if there's anything that you want to change, and then I would just recommend I get one last look at it, so it's final, and then we can bring it at the next meeting, which
So
in a week.
the comments that we had from the last meeting were, I think it was November, right? It was so packed full of days off that it seemed like we were getting any education done in November. That was one of the comments.
Yeah.
And what was the other comment? Was that the only thing? I think Eric wrote that one up.
Yeah, and we had made the changes, proposing having some of the half days PD not be on a Friday every time, and some of the feedback from the association that I got today was about not wanting it to be in the middle of the week, and they thought that might be more disruptive. So I think if we can go back and look at if it could be on a Monday, so maybe it's not the middle of the week, if that helps on it, which would just be a couple of the days. Their feedback was was fine on most of everything else.
Okay. So then we'll give you a little more time to.
Yeah, just,
review and socialize it, and we can do
we
the
just
next
got
meeting.
it to, and then we'll do the formal vote next time, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Cool. All right. Policy Subcommittee, here's the meeting scheduled for Thursday, March 9th at 6 p.m. And then from a Budget Subcommittee, so we have another school committee meeting a week from tonight.
Yes.
And then the Mendon boards are on the 15th. And the open hearing is scheduled for March 20th. I would agree that it's probably good to schedule another budget meeting. Yeah. I know I can't make the 7th of March, but I could probably make the 13th or 14th.
So those are open for me as well, I think.
All right, maybe we'll-
14th would be easier for me, just because we're coming right off of the strategic planning committee right before for 2 hours for
Yep.
some of us, but I mean, I can do either, but that would be a little easier on the 14th.
All right, we'll find out from Eric too, and shoot a quick email to him which one of those 2 dates work, but I have no problem with the 14th either. Okay,
Yep, 14's fine.
and then there is a superintendent evaluation subcommittee meeting. It's scheduled for March 2nd. It's gonna be Thursday at 5:30 p.m.
What a packed month.
We'll go on the goals, and then we'll, there matters, not any other matters not anticipated. But
I just wanted to cover for the committee that I did a walkthrough with Billy Casey and Director Schmidt to go over cleaning up some of the brush on the outside of the fields to avoid having, it's like preventive maintenance really, to avoid having some of it. I don't know whether that's coming in to anybody, but anticipated in that, it looks like the organization to help out our athletic field is up and running very well.
great.
We're taking some positive steps towards improving
So then I'm building off of that, future agenda items, music and athletic programming highlights, and the FY24 budget proposal. Filled with excitement. All right, sorry. All right, on that note, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good.